and via our iPhone and Android apps. Always on air for you 24/7, 365, uniting all communities. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Community Matters is a discussion show on Salaam Radio asking questions that matter to our community life. Over the coming weeks, we will be looking into various subjects of interest to the local community, such as loneliness and the role and the value of the cathedral in our city, and also the government selection of Peterborough as one of 6 cities to flagship the Inclusive Cities project. There's plenty to stay tuned for, so do listen in and make sure you send us your comments. Now, for the first part of tonight's show, we are joined by Fiona Henry to discuss our first Community Matters topic for tonight, which is about the drug scene. I'm very pleased to welcome my guest, Fiona, who is a mum and is worried about the growing number of drug needles that are seen on our streets, particularly near schools. Fiona tells me she is one of 3 mums, with Kirsty and Bernadette, who shared their worries about needles in the streets on school runs becoming more and more prevalent. They looked into the strategies of Peterborough City Council were using to deal with the issue. They were very concerned to find the drug issue had not been discussed in a public council meeting in Peterborough for 7 years, and they thought the only way forward was to petition the council in order to get something done. Kirsty, a very warm welcome to you on Salaam Radio.
Hiya, thanks for having me.
Now, you're one of 3 mums and you've started a campaign called Uniting Peterborough. How did you get started and what were your concerns?
Walking to school with the children, we noticed more and more often that there were needles in the street. Many of them uncapped, and we just wanted to work out why there was such a massive increase in what we were noticing. We went forward and set up a petition, spoke to local councillors who have been really supportive, and we've just kind of got the word out to as many people as we can in Peterborough to make sure that the council are going to listen.
How recently did you start this campaign?
This has been in the last kind of 6 weeks, I think. Yeah, okay. It's very recent. It's come up very quickly.
And it's really taking hold quickly.
Yes, it is.
I think you were telling me you've got over 300 signatures now on your petition.
Yes, yeah. Between the council e-petition and the paper petitions, we've got over 300 so far.
Surely. And we will mention later in our programme how our listeners can also contribute to that petition.
Yes, of course.
Okay. So, but what do you fear will happen if nothing is done to curb the growth of drug pushing and hard drug taking across our city?
We're not really looking at drug taking as a whole. I think there are so many programmes in place already to kind of help people get clean. What we're looking at is the symptoms of that, the needles being on the ground. Why are drug users not disposing of their needles safely, and what can we do to support them to ensure that they do?
And we're just talking about needles here, because cannabis is a widely taken drug, but that's mostly smoked.
Yeah, that it doesn't have the same kind of health risks as needles on the ground do. Children picking up needles, if you're scratched, you end up with a couple of months of antivirals, waiting for blood tests to be done.
Surely.
It's a very low risk, but that period between the blood tests is agonising for any parent.
Have you had it happen to you?
No, not me, thankfully. But we have had stories of a couple of children locally who've picked them up in parks, and thancfully we're fine. But it's a massive worry.
Of course, they might be fascinating and attractive to children.
Yes, we also had somebody tell us that his grandson had picked up a needle, run over to him and said, "Grandad, look at my pen. I found a pen." And that moment, I can't imagine how horrendous that would be to see this child who you absolutely adore holding a used needle.
Now, the council can arrange to collect discarded needles when they're reported. But what about drug taking and pushing and the use of needles, particularly in the vicinity of schools and parks that you mentioned? Have the police a role to play here?
Honestly, I don't know the answers to things like that, because we are purely concentrating on needles being disposed of in a safe way. We haven't really come across people taking drugs. It's not that we are seeing people taking drugs and then throwing their needles onto the floor. We are coming across them after they've been disposed of like that.
But you've been getting growing support from across the city, and particularly city councillors.
Yes.
And we understand Councillor Andy Coles is at a full council meeting tonight. Now, the main subject of that meeting is about the budget for the coming year, but he's putting forward a motion to the full council about the issue of discarded needles in his ward, Woodston and Fletton. So there's a step in the right direction.
Yes, it definitely is. We were contacted by Councillor Coles after he saw our campaign and invited us to a meeting that he'd set up within his ward. It does seem that things are progressing. People are meeting behind the scenes. There was a meeting earlier on today for the Safer Peterborough partnership, who discussed the issue of drug paraphernalia. We don't know any details of that meeting because they're behind closed doors, but there are definitely discussions happening.
Which is good.
Yes.
So something must change.
Yes.
What do you want the councillors to commit to?
We need them to look at the reasons why these needles are being dropped on the floor and not being put into the sharps bins, which users are given as part of their needle exchange package. They're given clean needles and antiseptic wipes and a sharps bin, which they are expected to use and return when they get a new package. We need to find out why they're not doing that and what we can do to make it to suggest to them that they need to bring them back and how we can get them to do that.
So it sounds as if there's already a solution perhaps just waiting to be used in the right way, but it's something about the behaviour. I guess what you're saying is that people who collect their drugs are getting the needles issued by local pharmacies? There's
Aspire are in charge of the needle exchange programme, which is funded by the council. So Aspire will give out needle packages and pharmacies. There's 23 pharmacies in Peterborough that are part of the needle exchange programme, and users are expected to bring their sharps bins back with their used needles.
But I guess if a user returns to Aspire and they don't have their sharps bin, that's this very bright yellow coloured.
They're not. They're much smaller than that. They're smaller than a book. You could fit them in a pocket. Okay. So they're not these big yellow things that you see in hospitals.
But if a user comes back to Aspire but doesn't bring a used needle box, I guess Aspire will still want to issue them with clean needles.
Yes, because it's all about harm reduction, and if they're not giving out clean needles, the risk is that they are going to share needles or use previously used needles, which is just it's not okay for them to do that because the risk is huge.
And is Aspire meeting the needs of the users around the city, or are they getting needles from elsewhere?
I can't answer that question at all. The Aspire are doing a great job. We met with Aspire on Monday, and they've taken everything we've said into account and done everything that they can already. We pointed out that a specific needle looked very much like a Calpol syringe, and small fingers would be attracted to that, and they immediately stopped ordering and brought up the issue with the supplier. And because of that as well, they've started a new poster campaign showing users the similarities between the needles that they use and things that children see in everyday life, to kind of show them the impact that it's having on families, because children are seeing these things and thinking that they are something familiar.
So well done, Aspire. It sounds as if they're really taking on board your
Absolutely.
concerns, and they're doing everything they feel they can.
Yeah.
So then, where next? Is it down to better explanation and counselling of the users themselves?
They are running a survey, with an anonymous survey with their users, to find out, to see if they can work out these very specific reasons that they're not bringing back their needles. So I think it's a case of kind of wait and see what comes from that. Also see what ideas the council have, and wait for something to be done. It's
well, now I'm just thinking about the other end of the story, and that is the great risk of children being contaminated and harmed by finding a needle and thinking it's a toy or a pen and playing with it. Should the schools be contributing to this whole safeguarding of children?
When it comes to schools, it's a very difficult area, because there's certain things you can't say to young children. I think drug sense is generally taught in secondary schools, but our children are all primary school age. So another thing that Aspire have said they're going to do is work with their, I think it's their youth outreach and also Bernardo's, and see what can be done for a possible programme in primary schools, just to teach younger children, if they see something that looks like this, that isn't a safe thing to touch, tell an adult. There are a lot of different areas that need to be explored. There's a lot of different remedies that need to be put in place for the overall solution. Indeed.
But you're speaking very highly of Aspire and the issues that they've taken on board, and the steps they're already taking, which is really good news. Now, does Andy Cole's question, you're hoping to get that his motion will be put tonight?
Yes.
But it could be very late on tonight after the budget debate. Will that achieve what your petition set out to do, or do you still need to submit your petition?
It's certainly going to set it in motion. Having these things spoken about in a full council meeting, make sure that it's in the public eye, it's in the council minutes. Anything that is then said in that meeting can't be changed. It sets it in motion. The petition is still really important, because that gets us a full council debate specifically about this issue.
And then you're not going to try and guess what you'd like the councillors to come up with?
We're not experts at all. We are just three mums that saw a problem. As much as we've been researching, we don't know exactly what the end result could be. So we're working with Aspire, we're working with local councillors, but it is going to be down to probably the Safer Peterborough Partnership to come up with that final result.
Okay, well, thank you. Now, what about you, our listeners? Are you concerned about the dangers from drugs in Peterborough? Would you like to see the council doing more to put in place an effective strategy? We would love our listeners to have a look at the petition, and if you feel it's right for you, then to sign up. So, Kirsty, how can people, Fiona, how can people get a paper copy of the petition to sign?
If you find us on Twitter at Needless Needle, or Facebook on Needless Needles Peterborough, you can get in touch with any of the three of us, and we can post or bring paper petitions to you. Or you can find the e-petition on the council website. In the menu, there's a list for e-petitions, and you can sign it through the internet like that.
So that's a lovely title, Needless Needle.
Yes.
So Twitter is #Needless Needle, and the Facebook is also
Needless Needle Peterborough.
Needless Needle Peterborough. Wonderful. Now I know we promoted your request on Community First's Facebook page, so our listeners can also find a link there. And I found the petition by going to the homepage of the Peterborough City Council website, clicking on, from the homepage, clicking on Council, and then on the link that says e-petitions listing. And I found it very easy. I just had to register because it was the first time I'd made a vote on the council e-petition list, and there my vote was registered. Now, I was number 120.
Yes.
But you're now up to?
On the e-petition, 124, and 180, I think, paper signatures.
Wonderful. So you're well on the way. Now, what's the target?
We need 500. We need 500 signatures for that full council debate. But the council can be a bit nitpicky, so we're aiming for a bit more than that. So once they've gone through and maybe discounted a few that have either signed both the e-petition and the paper, or not put the correct details in, that we've still hit that 500. And
there's quite a tight deadline for getting this complete.
Yes, the submission date is the 3rd of April.
Well now, listeners, we could, even by the end of tonight's show, be up to the 500 if you can get on the council e-petition website and vote in favour of the petition. What is the petition asking?
It's simply asking the the council to discuss and implement safer, better strategies in order to stop there being so many discarded needles in the street.
Wonderful. So do remember, listeners, if you have a comment, please text, email or WhatsApp. And if you know something about developing a better drug protection strategy for Peterborough, do let me know and we can chat together on Salaam Radio. What else would you like to share about this whole issue with us?
I mean, I think it's great that we've seen councillors coming together from across the city, across the parties. It seems to be an issue that has managed to unite people from across the parties, which is not something you see particularly often in politics. We've got so many people reaching out to us, giving us stories of things they have seen or things they have come across in their travels. Sorry. And it feels like a community spirit. You know, people are coming together because it's a big problem that needs to be resolved.
Behind that, then, is the bigger problem, I think, of drug taking itself, and drug pushing itself. How worried are you about that, with being a mum with young children?
It's always going to be a concern when you've got children starting to grow up. But it's all about education. I think there's so much that can be put into education and to support services once people are out of school. Because a lot of people who are taking drugs like heroin aren't taking it because they really want to be. They've fallen into certain circumstances and they're not being supported in ways that they could be right at the start of that addiction. And once you've fallen down that hole into a massive heroin addiction, it's so difficult to be able to accept support that there needs to be a way to get people right at the start.
I've heard of a phrase used, I think, in primary education called drug-proofing your children.
I've never heard of that.
Something you've come across?
I've never heard of that, no.
Right. If anyone listening to Salaam Radio at the moment knows about drug-proofing your children, is that a particular teaching program? Is it a particular campaign that's being used? Or perhaps it's a set of steps and advice for parents? It sounds like it's advice for parents. How do you keep an eye on your children, guide and advise them, knowing that as they grow up and they test the boundaries, they might just want to go their own way, take a little smoke of cigarette, try a little alcohol, and then take a pill, and suddenly they're on a slippery slope?
Yeah, it's my children are younger. My eldest is 11 and only starting secondary school this year. So I'm so sorry. So it's not an issue. We've had to kind of talk about yet. Obviously, going through the years, it's something that you have to be open about. I think you have to be willing to speak to your children. You have to make sure that they're not scared to come to you and say, "I've tried this. I want to try this. My friends are doing this." Because once your children are scared to come to you and tell you things like that and talk to you, you can't tell them the risks. You can't help them stay safe.
And then there must be such peer pressure to fit in.
Yeah.
They want to belong with the children of their same age. And in order to belong, if somebody's tried something, they think, well, maybe they ought to as well.
Yeah, I think we all remember that from school.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's helping our young people grow into teenagers and young adults who have got strong enough will and strong enough minds to say no to things they don't want to do. And hope.
Just a little advert and a mention of something that we're doing in this area of the city. Just up the road from where I'm speaking to you from is the Beaches Primary School. And it's going to be the venue for the launch of Cubs and Beavers, hopefully during the summer term. We've been doing a lot of planning behind the scenes, and we'd love to be able to offer our children the opportunity to have fun and to learn new skills and crafts, to earn badges, and for the adults who help to work with them to have fun as well. Through the great heritage of the Scout movement. So that's something that we're trying to do to give a positive outlook for our children.
Yeah, something for them to do. It's really important for them to have things to go out and do.
Are your children involved in scouting or?
No, they're not at the moment. They don't have any kind of interests out of school and after school clubs and things like that.
Right. But at least they're after school clubs, so that's appealing to their interests, giving them new things to do.
Yes.
What about then on the streets, children wandering around?
Personally, my children don't go out on their own. Okay. They do not go out on their own. Yeah. There are a lot of children who go out and play, and they're in parks and they're wandering and exploring through bushes and things. Obviously, that's something we've stopped our children from doing completely because we don't feel like it's safe for them to do so.
Sure. Yeah. That brings me back to a time maybe 8 or 9 years ago at St Mark's Church, where I'm the minister, and the entrance to St Mark's Church was a complete field of bushes and shrubs, and it was used by rough sleepers, by sex workers, and by people taking drugs and leaving needles.
Yeah, there were 600 needles found in June 2005 outside St Mark's, which led to the fencing being put up.
Goodness.
Yeah, that's one of the very small pieces of data that we've managed to find.
Okay.
Through weeks of research. Yeah.
Well, Fiona, thank you so very much for coming on and sharing your experience, and particularly the petition that you're pushing forward. 3 mums seeing a problem and wanting to do something about it, and you've started a campaign, you've started a real movement of change that will benefit everyone across this city. So thank you again, and listeners, do please get on and sign up to that petition. Now, just before the break, let me mention something that's been happening in response to the very cold weather we had last week. Listeners will remember we chatted to Sean Evans and Stephen Pettican about homelessness, and particularly offering them overnight accommodation with extra spaces being found during sub-zero temperatures. But with the beast from the east, we had sub-zero temperatures during the day. So our city council sent out a call for support to give the homeless shelter during the daytime. The Light Project staff, led by Stephen Pettican, teamed up with the homelessness officers from the council. St Mark's Church opened our doors every day from last Wednesday to welcome our homeless guests. Sadly, that service will come to an end this Friday. We are waiting to hear about more support and care for our homeless neighbours so that they can feel encouraged all through the year to find the support they need to make a better life. We're heading for a short break now, but do stay tuned because after the break we're going to learn about a rickshaw.
Stay tuned to Salaam Radio after this short ad break.
Have you visited Amar Food Store yet? Now open at Lincoln Road Triangle, 613B Lincoln Road, Peterborough. Pay us a visit and take advantage of our special offers and great range of products on groceries, vegetables, fruits and halal meat. All your favourite brands under one roof. We take payment by card, have free customer parking and offer a free local delivery service. Also available, Payzone for bill payments and money transfer services to Pakistan. Amar Food Store and Halal Meat. Now open at Lincoln Road Triangle. Call us on 01733 68 73 74. High in quality, low in prices.
Third world and developing countries are home to some of the most vulnerable children on the planet. Malnutrition, severe lack of medical aid and access to clean water are just some of the horrific challenges faced by orphans across Africa and Asia. Children of Adam, a Peterborough charity, need your help to bring aid to these orphans for just £25 a month. To sponsor an orphan or assist with other projects, please call 0300 321 0032 or visit www.childrenofadam.net.
Do you own a restaurant or takeaway? Cater Fair is an expert supplier of new and used commercial catering equipment. Visit caterfair.co.uk for quality equipment on sale at the lowest prices, or call us on 01733 310 115 or visit us at 11 Royce Road, Fengate, Peterborough.
Need a great place to chill out? Look no further than The Lounge for quality food and drinks at a great price. Try our varied menu: pasta, seafood, burgers, grills, salad, soup, rice and sides. Also hot and cold drinks, milkshakes and mocktails. Leave room for our exquisite desserts. The Lounge, 417 Lincoln Road, Peterborough. Call 01733 709 306 to order for delivery. The Lounge, friendly service with a great atmosphere.
Gems and jewels. Wise sayings, interesting events, and moral lessons from Islamic history. A comparison to the generosity of Hatim.
A man from the Ansar went to Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma and said, "O Abdullah, a son was born to me today, and I named him after you, but his mother has died." Abdullah said, "May Allah bless you with your endowment and reward you for your tragedy." He called his agent and said, "Go immediately and purchase a young female slave for the child, so that she may suckle it. And give 2,000 dinars to the father, so that he can spend it in raising his son." He then said to the man from the Ansar, "Return to us after some days pass, for you have come to us at a time when we have very little wealth." He answered, "Had you preceded Hatim?" A man from the Arabs used as an example for generosity, by a single day, the Arabs would not be mentioning him today.
If you want to learn about Islam and Muslims, stay tuned to Salaam Radio 106.2 FM.
Welcome back to our listeners to Salaam Radio 106.2 FM. We're Facebook Live, YouTube Live, online at salamradio.co.uk and via our iPhone and Android apps. You can email us at studio@salamradio.co.uk. Our text and WhatsApp number is 07745 278 978. This is Adrian Holstock presenting Community Matters, the radio show for all communities across Peterborough and beyond. Let me introduce my second guest, James Worgan. James offers a free rickshaw service in the city centre to spread a bit of kindness. They also help give out sandwiches and clothes to rough sleepers. Welcome, James.
Good evening, Adrian. Thank you.
So what is it you actually do with this rickshaw?
All it is once a fortnight in Peterborough. I go with a colleague, Charles, recently with another colleague, Emma. So a couple of people to help me, which is great. And I'll be in town and I'll literally give people in the later evening, so anything from sort of 9 o'clock maybe to 1 o'clock. I'll sort of pick my times as to when I'm in town. And maybe those people in town maybe are a little bit worse for wear, or maybe they just think it's a bit of fun. The idea is to spread a bit of kindness and happiness. If they want a free lift, I give them a free lift. Sometimes they'll, because kindness often spreads, so if I give kindness, often they'll give kindness. The main idea is to raise awareness of homelessness, and in support of the winter night shelter, I'll often have a charity bucket, and more often than not, people are kind enough to donate to the charity bucket. And whilst I'm giving the rickshaw rides, my friends, my colleagues, Charles and Emma, they'll often be with sandwiches, donuts, all sorts of food, talking to rough sleepers, making sure they've got something to eat. Because as much as there is provision, it's a great city that we live in. On Saturdays, the soup kitchen doesn't run on a Saturday. So most of the time there's provision for people who are less fortunate, but there is a real need on a Saturday. So we find that they do need sandwiches, food, hot chocolate, cups of tea, cups of coffee, particularly in this weather, gloves, socks, underpants, hats, maybe sleeping bags. And I know, it's not great, perhaps that rough sleepers are visible, but unfortunately it's the day and age that we live that some people just need a little bit of help.
Where did you get the idea from?
Just really an observation. As a child growing up, if you live in Peterborough, you're probably familiar with Nobby, and he seemed to be that was his name. He seemed to be the only sort of homeless person in Peterborough. And as the years have gone on, social changes, social trends, the number of homeless people has risen. I observed street pastors on one occasion, and I found it really great. But on one of the occasions I was with the street pastors and observing that there was 27 people in doorways of shops, just in the doorways. That doesn't include riverbanks or the hidden homeless as such. That was the visible in the town centre, and I just really tried to put myself in their shoes.
You mentioned street pastors there. I have invited street pastors along, but they're a bit short-handed at the moment, so they haven't been able to make it. Could you just help our listeners understand what street pastors are?
Yeah, they're a fantastic organisation. They're originally set up originally in the bigger cities, Birmingham, London, Manchester, and it was initially to help with gun violence and crime along that area. But it's evolved again to helping people in the later hours of the evening. Sometimes people do take excess alcohol. It might make them a little bit ill. If they're females, that their shoes may break, and flip-flops are provided. Water can be provided, foil blankets if people are cold and chilly. And it's just to make sure, as much as people might have created self-inflicted harm, it's still there to help, because to make sure that they can get home, they're in touch with local taxi firms to make sure that they can be safely taken home. And if people are ill, they can be in touch with the police or with the ambulance, just to make sure that people are safe.
Now, you've been talking about rough sleepers, gosh, and how many there are that you're coming across. But are you getting to know them, and what sort of characters are you finding?
I do find actually that they move on, which is great news. There's a couple or three which, since I've been doing it from April last year, are still visible, but the majority of them do seem to move and move on, which I think is great news, because it's not necessarily as long term as it could be. I don't think they really remember me as much as maybe I recognise their faces. They more identify with the rickshaw, which is great, because I don't want to personally be known, but they can identify with the rickshaw, which is great. And there are different stories. Some of them, unfortunately, you were talking about needles earlier and drugs. Some of them, they do have dependency on substances, whether that substance be drugs, as you've mentioned, or alcohol. But some of them, it really is unfortunate. Some of the people I've met, they may have broken up with a partner. And then they've broken up with a partner, and this is more often than not the case. They then can't afford a deposit or rent for a new property once a relationship has broken down. It could be as simple as a landlord has asked them to leave at short notice, and they don't have a deposit for a property. Sometimes, if it's been a violent relationship, somebody might move from a different area to a different area. And then, of course, because they then don't have a local connection, it makes it even harder for them. So I would say more often than not, it is genuine hardship cases that it sounds like I'm coming across, although there is a strong amount of, unfortunately, substance abuse, which I guess links with the drug conversation you were having earlier.
What would you say to members of the public who look down upon homeless people as scroungers and beggars?
I know this is an Islamic radio station. I'm a Christian myself. Now, in the Bible, there's a verse that's Matthew 25:40. Now, when I say the king, I refer to Jesus. Yes. And it basically says, the king will truly reply, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. And I think with humanity, yes, we all make mistakes, and there's things that we do wrong. There's another verse, 1 Corinthians 13:13, abide of faith, hope, charity, but the greatest of all of these is charity. There's other translations which say love, but the original version was charity. And I know in Islam, having a brief look at the bits of the Quran before I came this evening, that, kindness is something in the Quran and Islam as well. And yes, some of it can be self-inflicted, but I kind of see it as a ladder. Yes, we can say that we're better than people, or we're living a holier or a more virtuous life than other people, but surely life is about lifting people up, giving them a lift up, helping them on that ladder, rather than standing on their feet, maybe lifting them up. And yes, we are waiting for the return and judgment, and there won't be heaven until we have that. But what's wrong with making the world we live in a better place anyway, for everybody?
Absolutely. And I think it's good that we're able to mention our faiths. We're both Christian. As you say, Salaam Radio was founded by Muslims, and it is for all communities across our city and beyond. One of the connections I found between our two faiths is this question of loving our neighbours. Jesus taught us to love God and to love our neighbours, and my Muslim friends tell me that in the Muslim ethos, they're also encouraged to love their neighbour, and for them, a neighbour is somebody, I believe, who lives in 40 directions or 40 properties in every compass direction, which is an enormous number of people.
That's fantastic. That really is fantastic.
And I think it's good that we don't overlook the fact that the homeless are also our neighbours, because we share the same space in the city, we breathe the same air, we're human beings, I would say that we're created in the image of God. and therefore we should respect and care for the homeless, the rough sleepers, as much as people who live in the house next door.
I can certainly agree with that. That sounds fantastic.
Now, you've mentioned volunteers out on the streets, your two colleagues and also the street pastors. What about the city council and the police? Do they have a role to play?
Don't really have, or I haven't come into too much contact with the police or the city council. They do have a role to play. Obviously, it's not like some cities or councils. I mean, you hear of some cities and councils, certainly London, Oxford Street, you often hear of spikes which are placed outside doorways to prevent people from sleeping. So as much as I'm sure it's something the council doesn't really want, let's be real about it, it hasn't gone to the stage of some cities or towns, so they seem to have some heart, and I know that reading the newspaper, the Peterborough Telegraph recently, there's more housing provision they're looking at. They're spending more money on it to try and improve it, which is absolutely fantastic. It doesn't alter the fact that there's the need there now, but they're working on it, I think.
Indeed, and I know around where I live at St Mark's Church on Lincoln Road. Every other property seems to be turning into residential flats, and even new block being built across the road at Manor House.
I saw that on the way here, and I've seen there's new housing in Breton, and I believe some of that was earmarked as well. So the future is seeming quite bright. Maybe the immediate problem hasn't been addressed, but they're certainly building and working on it by the looks of it.
Shall we come back to the rickshaw? I'm intrigued by its construction. Was it something you bought commercially or had specially made?
I bought it from London, Marble Arch. I wanted something that I thought would be fun and quirky for Peterborough. Obviously, they're used a lot in London. Some people moan about the exorbitant costs and charges that there are in London, so again I thought it'd be a little bit of a twist if ultimately it was free, and the other thing, I think it's humility. One of the things, I'm going off tangent a little bit, so please bear with me, something I have discovered is on the earth that we live of 8 billion people, or approximately 8 billion people, I've discovered that 2 billion people don't have shoes or inadequate shoes, so they're susceptible to parasitic worm. And I was really conscious of the idea of how much some people on earth are struggling, and it's more of a sort of humble or a humbling mode of transport. Most of us have cars, we're blessed by cars or motorcycles or even cycles or buses. If you look at developing nations, they would treat a bicycle perhaps the same way that we would treat a 7-seater car. And as well as being fun and quirky, maybe it's humbling to me as well. It gives attention, it's noticed, and it humbles me.
So tell me, what's the furthest you've been asked to take somebody? I do only do it in town, pretty much from Broadway to where the pubs and clubs are. I'm no Chris Hoy or any particular cyclist, so I don't have the muscles or the strength to do it. And it's just meant to be a bit of fun. What do people see when they step into the rickshaw?
There's scripture and verse, and I know this obviously isn't Christian, but to me, I think if non-believers can get a feel and a message of love,
yes.
Whatever your faith, if a non-believer can get an idea of faith and love, then maybe it's not something they take away with them immediately. Maybe it'll be years down the line, they'll think of something they'll recollect. But just the hope is that there'll be a seed and something can grow there.
You must be very fit to be doing this for 3 or 4 hours of a Saturday night?
In all fairness, it's normally a couple of hours I do. So sometimes I might go from 9:30 till 11:30. Sometimes I'll go later. So normally when I do it, I do only do it for a couple of hours. So I really am not that fit.
And Peterborough doesn't suffer from hills, so you've not got those to go up.
No, it's very smooth. I'm blessed in that regard.
Yeah. What's the most unusual passenger you've been asked to carry?
I have to be honest, that the homeless themselves.
Right.
So as much as the idea is it's for everyone, and there are characters. I think that the nicest way of putting it, some of the rough sleepers are characters, and if they are a little bit worse for wear, some of the conversation can be a little bit strange at times.
But it sounds as if your relaxed manner is always going to put them at ease.
I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so. It's it is meant to be spreading love.
I don't know if you will know this, but are you a unique service in our country?
I have absolutely no idea. I have to be. I really have no idea. I'm sure it may be in the sense of in a rickshaw in a small city or a relatively medium town. Perhaps I am a unique service in regards to people helping people. And certainly, lots of people have heart and love. So definitely no different to the next man. Surely, but the actually unique service of offering a rickshaw with Bible messages in it, a helping hand, a friendly conversation, and the opportunity for people to feel loved and respected, and to build up their esteem, all sounds tremendous work. Thank you. Now, what days of the week? You said it was only on Saturdays, every other Saturday? That's it. I'd like for it to be maybe every Saturday. There's other slogans. I can't run before I can walk. So I'd like to commit to a fortnight at this stage. Maybe in the future I'd like to make it every Saturday, just because the need is Saturday. I don't want to. I'm sure there's need there all the time, but with the likes of the Soup Kitchen and other aids and organisations which are there on other days of the week, then the greatest need for the service or what I'm doing is on a Saturday. How can our listeners contribute to your work? Really, if they want a free lift, by all means have a free lift. And it is a free lift. If they choose to then want to help the winter night shelter with the charity bucket, they can. But if they genuinely want a free lift, please have it, because it's a bit of fun and a bit of kindness. If they then choose, I think the Quran mentions an act of kindness should be returned with another act of kindness. So if somebody wants a lift and then they feel in their heart that they want to then be kind or give an act of kindness to somebody else, then please do so. So yes, there's the free lift, charity bucket if they so wish to do so. Or more importantly, with the outreach to the rough sleepers, there are things that they need. So, we are all human beings, so some of the ladies may need things that they need during the month. Surely. There's underwear, socks, gloves, hats, sleeping bags, something I haven't done yet, but maybe toothbrushes. I mean, we all need to have human things. Just like Food Bank makes provision for people in emergencies who are going without a meal, you're describing something that's making provision for people who need a coat on their back, more personal sanitary materials and so on, and shoes on their feet as well. They're typically okay with shoes. Most of them have trainers or shoes, and I think, for instance, the Salvation Army Citadel often helps with rough sleepers clothing. However, keeping clean and being fresh, socks seems to be the greatest need. I really do at the moment have a great deal of respect for socks.
And if people have got a drawer full of socks that they want to donate, what should they do?
I think as far as, so for instance, the Winter Night Shelter or homeless charities concerned in Peterborough, they would suggest perhaps the Salvation Army is always a good place to give items. But I mean, again, rough sleepers are human beings, so maybe just have a chat. As much as, you know, it's not necessarily a chat like I'm having with you now. They will tell you if they need a hat or gloves or socks, and you know, even a conversation as well. If you can imagine 24 hours without anywhere that's your own home, often they'll have friends, but it can be very lonely as well. So sometimes just a little chat, even if it's a 5-minute chat, as they are human beings, might just make their day.
Surely. I mean, I so agree with you there, because this week we've had the Homeless Day Shelter set up by the Light Project and working with homelessness officers from the council in St Mark's Church and Church Hall. And when I've wandered in occasionally during the week, it's lovely just to shake hands. The homeless folk that I meet there really want just to shake hands, because they're being given warmth and shelter and a cup of tea or coffee. And then very gently to sit together round a table, and they want to talk. And if we can find it in our hearts to give them time, we don't have to know how to talk to them. We just have to be there and ask them, how are you? What's going on in your life at the moment?
And that is fantastic. And it's, with regards to the verses I mentioned earlier, I don't mean to say that to you. I have utmost respect for yourself, obviously. I know very little verse, if I'm being honest. But we are all human beings, and, you know, whatever faith you are, we're all children of God. And, you know, I think to myself, well, what if it was my child? What would I do if my child was struggling? And if your child was struggling, would you let your child suffer or struggle, or would you help your child? And ultimately, we're all children of God. So you mentioned the compass, the 40, the 40, the 40, the 40. And this isn't meant to be disrespectful. And I love what you mentioned there. But we all have the same Father. Yeah. We are all children. Yeah. And if your child or if your children were struggling, would you let them struggle?
No, indeed. And you wouldn't judge them either. The compassion would come first. The practical help would come first. And then it's a matter of helping them to rebuild their lives and who they are by their choice.
Absolutely.
A final message for our listeners, James?
I would just like to thank you for inviting me to this radio station. It's nice that Peterborough has a radio station that talks about current affairs and things that are really relevant and matter. And as much as saying thank you for inviting me along, I think it's great, the title of the radio station. I think it's lovely that it's called Peace, or that it means peace. And, you know, just wish peace upon everybody who listens.
Wonderful. And thank you for being my guest tonight, James Worgan.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Adrian.
And now a little bit of news for our listeners. On the weekend of 17th and 18th of March, that's Saturday and Sunday, 17th and 18th of March, we're going to start looking at a project to tidy up and beautify all the open spaces in the Gladstone area of Peterborough. We're going to turn them into local gardens and have Gladstone in bloom, which is a very small part of Britain in bloom. And also we're going to do a litter pick with a community-wide turnout. So that we're meeting at 10 o'clock on Saturday the 17th at the Open Door Baptist Church at Harris Street. And first of all, we're going to meet in the church to look at displays of the areas around Gladstone Street and then do a litter pick. And on Sunday, we're meeting on the corner of Russell Street and Cromwell Road at 1:30, followed by 3 p.m. in the Allama Iqbal Centre. Well, that's all the time we have for tonight on Community Matters. Remember, you are the community that matters wherever you are, and we'd like everybody to be a community that lives in peace and harmony. Coming up next week, I hope to be chatting with Sarah Brown, the newly appointed Canon Missioner at Peterborough Cathedral. Meanwhile, Salaam, Shalom, and the peace of God to you all. Good night.
Stay tuned to Salaam Radio after this short ad break.
Sponsor a hifz from the Penny Appeal for just 70 pence a day to teach them to recite the Holy Quran. Call 03000